Welcome, everybody. My name is Peter LaMantia. I'm the CEO of Authentic Web. Today, I'm going to share with you a webinar that, over the last few years, I've talked to a hell of a lot of IT directors and senior sysadmins, DevOps people, and I thought it'd really be valuable to share with you what they say about, trying to manage domains, DNS, and certificates. It's just a pain. And, sometimes when you see what other people say, you can see yourself in that and probably learn something from it. So I hope you learned something today, and we'll just get into it. This will take us about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If I don't pick them up, you can send me an email or I can follow up with you at a later time. So what we're going to run through today is really what enterprise directors say. What do they say about their experiences? What their problems are. Some of the top 10 symptoms is something that we put in recently. These are all things that people have told us and what concerns them and why they realize they need to do it. What's happening inside the enterprise? Why is this a problem and why does this problem persist? We'll look at some of the certificate management issues. Some of the compromise evidence that we've seen, some of the vulnerability risks and impacts, and really the issues around compliance. How do you really address change management control in this environment? I wanted to share a couple of results from audits that we've done, really give you a good a view on some of those examples, and then just show you a two-step process to discover the vulnerabilities and then figure out how to deal with that. All of this to reduce your work effort, get compliance and control, reduce your total cost of ownership, and frankly, just improve the life of your team and your organization. So just a little bit on us. So we're Authentic Web. So about 10 years ago, I sort of looked at this and saw all the issues related to managing domains and DNS. And the systems that we were using were just driving us crazy. We just couldn't get it under control. And I've recognized, and so has our team, that security and compliance and performance are big issues when it comes to managing domains and DNS. So we do that with tools around control, visibility, and automation, pardon me, just to bring everything into a single pane of glass. So let's just get into it and see what these guys say. So always sitting at a computer, and some of the things they say to me is that domains just drive me nuts. We just have no idea why we registered these domains or what they might be used for. The other thing they say is that every time we lose a sysadmin, the responsibility for those domains and that DNS just rolls up to that director. So whether or not you've acquired a new company, you've lost a sysadmin, it always falls up that chain, and then managing multiples of these accounts is really difficult. The other thing they say is we don't approve domains, but we just need to set them up on the DNS. But often there's a shadow IT environment going on inside the business, and then it's the T guy responsibility to manage that. So it's just such a pain for these people to manage it. They really don't have any change controls, and a lot of them tell us that the state of their DNS and the security just really scares them. They also have no idea who has access to all these different systems, who changed what and when they changed it. So those that are concerned about security and compliance, really feel lost because they just don't have any way to deal with this. The other thing that they talk about also is just losing a domain. It's just so easy to lose a domain if you're connected to, retail registrar systems where you get a ton of emails. It just turns out to be noise. But so if you miss a key email and you lose that domain, well, it's the IT guys who always get blamed. And then they always say as well that it just, there's nothing worse than a DNS issue. If you have a DNS issue, and you need to change that to fix it, you can often be stuck for hours until the DNS propagates around the internet. So it's just, it's frustrating because you may have fixed it, but you've got to wait for the internet to recognize that you've fixed it. They often state that they have multiple registrars, multiple DNS systems, and it's just a waste of time. When they have an issue, they have to hunt it down, who's got access, who's got the right access to make the permissions, or make the changes, and they need to fix it. So these are pretty common. We hear this a lot from people. And I kind of compiled some of those into the 10 symptoms of domain pain or DNS pain as well. So just very quickly, these are just kind of fun. We allowed a key domain to expire. Why? Because we didn't know. We have a DNS hijack risk due to poor visibility and controls. If you don't know who's operating it, you're exposed there, and the guys know it. We do not enforce change management and workflow. It's simply not there. And they know that exposes them. They use systems with proper identity or access controls. If you find that you allowed a certificate to expire, the same thing as a domain expire, you just didn't know it was going to expire, some legacy thing, maybe somebody set it up, a while ago and has since left the company. Do not have a global DNS security policy. This is so common. So, if you think of your zone files, I'm sure that those that deal with the DNS today can look at this and say, we don't really know what's set up on the DNS. So how can you control that with multiple systems in place? It's frankly just impossible to enforce a policy. And again, having many siloed registrars or DNS providers, that's just a big problem that a lot of people struggle with. And all this leads to wasted IT time to hunt down these domains and DNS issues. And then the ninth one, even if you did have a DNS security policy in place with multiple systems, many people throughout the organizations operating in their silos, it's simply just impossible to enforce that. And finally, we come to the Excel. Managing domains by Excel is what most people do today, and it's just not very empowering. So what they tell us they need are a whole bunch of things. So they come to us and they say largely that, we need a single pane of glass to manage all this stuff. And they list a whole bunch of requirements to be able to consolidate these assets, have a registered enterprise class, have a racing matrix so you know who's doing what, who's accountable, and who's informed, role-based permissions, workflow, DNS security management around SPF, DMARC, DNSSEC, and other settings is becoming more important. Setting up secondaries. If you're not using a CDN, and even then you might want it, but if you're not using a CDN, you need to have a secondary DNS in place, because if that primary DNS network gets hit by a DDoS, you're out of business. If you have a secondary that's slaving those DNS records, those queries will continue to get answered and your business stays up. Transaction cost accounting is important to be able to allocate costs, single sign-up and multi-factor. A big common one is just having all the top-level domains available. A lot of people have told us that they have multiple registrars because they can't support all the different top-level domains with one. So they end up having a few that they put into place. Zone file visibility and management tools need that. And they need some sort of DNS security visibility to see where the vulnerabilities are and how to automate that. And of course, 24/7 support. This is what these guys are saying to us. So I thought, with that in mind of what they've said, where their problems are, what symptoms that they see, and what they need, I thought I'd share what we also see going on inside the enterprise. And, as a backdrop on this, it used to be really easy. You had one domain, one registrar, one DNS provider, and often just one C-level and an IT person. Set it up, set a website up, and away you go. But fast forward to now, this has become really complicated. You've got hundreds or thousands of domain names, likely many registrars due to different IT preferences over the years, and no one's consolidated, or M&A, which is a very common issue where you're acquiring a company and you have to pull in and manage those domains from different registrars. Same principle for DNS. So we see very sophisticated organizations with many different DNS services live. And this comes down to the compliance controls and the pain for the IT guys to be able to manage that. Also importantly today, as digital has exploded, the surface area has increased, and everything is digital. So the saying goes that business is digital, and digital depends on the DNS. So everybody in the organization is a stakeholder in domains, but often it's not fully owned. So if you think about that complexity, now let's think about what happens inside that business today. So we talk a lot about the root cause of these issues, where silos, different people, but that nobody really owns this problem end to end. So if you think about when you need something, someone in marketing, someone in product, someone in legal, they need something done. They need a new domain or they need a domain edit. They'll enter that request in a ticketing system. They may just use an email or they may use forms. So somewhere on the other end of that email or form, our group of people will then enter the domain name into our registrar system, one of perhaps many. And then those folks then need to submit a ticket for the IT guys to set up the managed DNS. Again, one of many. Now, some companies have some DNS analytics or security tools that might be looking at some of the endpoints on the flagship domain name. So those tools will go out and they'll look at those endpoints on the zone file, assuming they see them all. But that's one domain. That might be just a flagship. You may have tens of domains that you have active or even hundreds in a large organization. You need to cover all these things. But where there is an issue, it'll get pointed back into this flow again for people to go and enter the information or enter the changes in a system. Security policies, if they exist, as we talked before, they're very much disconnected and they're very hard to enforce. And then zone reviews. So this is something that I've struggled with a lot over the years. You know, what's in these zone files? So a domain can have hundreds or even thousands of different records. Are all those records known? Do you know all the IP addresses? Do you understand all the CNAMEs and where they're resolving to? So I know many circumstances where companies have had CNAMEs live and they've been taken over by, you know, gambling or porn sites, or have just simply been allowed to create a vector for attack, particularly on a CNAME, where that endpoint resource might be connected to some other system as well. So zone file reviews are really hard. You start to get into it, you start to look at all the zones, the different A records, CNAMEs, et cetera, and you think, well, should this be live or not? And typically, over the years, people have set stuff up, but they're afraid to change anything, because if you change something on the DNS and it's the wrong move, you can be out. So there's a way to manage that. But in today's environment, it simply gets left. People leave it alone. They don't want to risk it. So as a result of this, I've equated this to like the kitchen junk drawer. When you get a new domain, it's nice and clean. But over the years, you continue to put in different settings, different resource records into the zone file, and it gets messier and messier and messier. And then, of course, there's the dreaded Excel. So I've experienced this as well. We used to own about 1,000 domains. We were part of a Fortune 1000, and the guys would come to me and say, well, should we renew these? And I would always say, you know, what's running on these things? So we get someone involved, but, you know, IT guys are, you know, their time is precious. So we'd often just say, well, look, just renew it. We'll figure it out later, but we never really do. So this is really typical. Everybody that I share with this, you know, clients and prospects say that this is how they've been running their digital business. And it's just becoming, you know, too much exposure to keep running it like this. And the reason is there are a lot of vulnerabilities, you know, a lot of business risks, impacts, and a lot of compliance gaps. So I thought I'd share a couple of slides just on, you know, some of the research, some of the evidence in the news. You know, the scale and severity of DNS compromises just continue to escalate. My view that every compromise starts with the DNS. The DNS is the public network where the bad guys go to enumerate your zone files, try to find endpoints that aren't secure, that aren't being monitored, and then they can execute a multi-pronged attack on that basis. So we're seeing simple things. You know, the worst one that's out there is a DNS hijack. If you do get hijacked, it's an absolute nightmare internally, depending on what that actor might be doing. It became so severe that a couple of years ago, the Department of Homeland Security and the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK issued warnings to organizations that they need to get a better handle on their DNS and get it under control. There was a great report as well from IDC in 2021. And they did a report both on the inbound DNS threats, but also on the management of your external DNS network. And they talked about the increase in attacks, suffered from more diverse types of attacks, and all of these exploits come from the DNS protocol itself or misconfigurations. The DNS is not secure. It's not secure by design, and it's publicly available. To secure it, you need to take actions on the DNS to make sure that it is locked down, that it's monitored, and that you can see what the vulnerabilities that might exist. So some of these risks and impacts, again, coming back to this notion of ownership, it's often not owned holistically inside an organization. There may be a set of domains that are owned by some group and a set owned by some other group, but not all are looking at some of the security and compliance issues that might be related to that. So why you're exposed is lack of ownership, governments or digital control systems. Anything can happen from a digital outage or a brand impersonation. And, phishing, as we know, is just a top vector of attack. So if you're not setting SPF records on all of your domains, all of those domains can be used against you to conduct phishing attacks. And it becomes quite believable because you own the domain. So someone receiving that might say, well, I can tell that that domain is owned by us as the organization. So I click on something that then results in malware, fraud, credential theft, or, as we see often, just a plain old outage from a DNS hijack or some other reason. I thought I'd dig into this just a little bit deeper. I'm not going to read all this, but I just wanted to highlight it. So this came from a CISO briefing paper that we did that's available. If you want to shoot me a note, I can send it over to you. So just talking about a few of these. So one is a DNS hijack or a man-in-the-middle attack. So one of the preventions against that is setting up DNSSEC records. So DNSSEC has been a very difficult thing for most people to set up in the past, but now some of the more sophisticated providers are automating that. With the toggle button, you turn it on and the keys roll at the end of the year. If you're interested in this, I'd encourage you to look up the sea turtle attack that occurred about, I think, a couple of years ago. Social engineering is another big one. If you have multiple live DNS services or registrar systems, at some of these larger providers, they're really susceptible to be compromised by social engineering. And guys get in there, they can set up an A record, a CNAME. You won't know it's set up. They'll sit and wait and find that right time to perpetrate the attack. And you won't be able to figure out why that happened until suddenly you look. And yes, it's the DNS. Somebody set up an A record and pointed it somewhere. Phishing attack, again, SPF and DMARC. You need to cover everything. If you're not using a domain for any email, well, you need to set SPF equals V equals minus all. That means that the servers out of the internet, they won't allow an email to be sent to it. Really simple thing to do, but we invariably see in the audits that we do, just nobody's doing this. Some are starting to, but it's a slow process for most. End-to-end encryption gaps is another big one. So, we've all set up redirects. Many domains redirect. You can redirect a really good domain into a deep link inside your website that's relevant to that domain name. But a lot of people have just set these up as HTTP only redirects. So, it may be HTTPS at the end, but if it's HTTP to start, then you're creating a vector for, an actor to get in the middle of that session and either hijack that, redirect it somewhere else, or sit on that connection and listen to the conversation. Dangling DNS. So I sort of think of these in two ways. One is, you can also call it orphan DNS. So if you've got an A record, let me paint the picture. So you've got someone in the digital marketing group, pardon me, they set up a program, and that program's going to run, let's say, until March 31st, and then on April 1st, they're going to move on. So they'll set it up on a web service. Maybe it's Amazon Web Services or another shared host somewhere. They'll set up their program, they'll run it. They've already asked the DNS guy to set up an A record and point it over there. When the program's over, the web or the digital guys will shut down the web service, but the DNS is still pointing. It's still pointing to that A record, or in the case of a C name, it's still pointing to that C name. So nobody ever circles back and shuts those down. So those names are now exposed. So that IP address is available. It gets rolled back into a pool. So, really smart actors can go in there, get that IP, and take over that endpoint. Same thing with C names, and C names are actually even more common. Another one is just internal actors. So, if you're here, you're probably interested in security. So you know that a lot of these issues relate to internal actors. Doesn't necessarily have to be malicious. It can just be an error or an oversight where, somebody set something up, they haven't recognized that that's an issue, but that's exposing the business to some perpetrator to be able to get in there. And lastly, just DNS reconnaissance. So just important reminder that, the DNS, again, is public. So there are lots of enumeration tools out there that people can do and walk the zone, find out what you've got set up. And they use that. They use that to find what kind of infrastructure you set up. And as the digital surface area just continues to expand, this is a big issue. So if you've got it on the DNS, it's going to be exposed, and everything you're running in digital depends on the DNS. So you need to control this, lock it down. If you show that you're locked down, those actors will go away and they'll pick on someone else. So in sort of summary of that, so we know that domains and DNS are extremely vulnerable to compromise. So if you think about that in terms of what's going on with these external threats, everything from, as we discussed, social engineering, there could be a CA compromise, man-in-the-middle attack, DNS or domain hijacks themselves, or phishing. All of these threats are out there all the time. And, actors are looking for opportunities, looking for avenues or holes in your network to be able to get in there and compromise your business or compromise your customers. And it persists because it's just really hard for IT teams to get and keep control of this. As we've discussed, all the challenges that the IT directors talk about, from multiple systems, not having vulnerability visibility tools, it's just really difficult to get this stuff under control. And it's really all these internal causes. So the way we manage domains today in DNS is much like we did it in 1999. A lot of manual processes, a lot of inconsistent expertise around this as well. We often find that inside a business, there are a very small handful of people that really understand the DNS. And those are the people that everybody relies on, but everything is done manually. So if you think about all of these items, these are the issues that are causing the problems on the DNS. And that fact that there's lack of change management controls, it just doesn't exist inside an enterprise, and that creates the challenges and the exposures that are out there. I want to bring up two examples from some of the audits we did. So we run audits on people all the time through different tools that we have. So one of the things that we see a lot are just the multiple DNS systems that are live today. So these are some really sophisticated organizations and have multiple different DNS service providers around there. So it's really impossible for teams to ensure oversight over this. And there's a big risk here that, someone can easily get in there, hijack that, get into one of those systems, lie in wait, and execute that. So really the best practice is to consolidate your DNS and enforce change management over every single one, and set a policy and then enforce that policy within the business. So if this is happening to these very large and sophisticated organizations, I'm sure that it's happening with, whoever you might be representing today. The other one I want to point out is SPF and DMARC. I talked about this before. So, on these same companies, one thing that's kind of interesting here, if you look at the percentage coverage, this one financial services company, this is a company that we've been following for a lot of years, and they've actually made huge progress. They've gone from, 5 or 6% up to 51%. But for the life of me, I don't know why they just can't get to 100. Why can't you set SPF minus all on everything? Because they've got things covered where they've got their MX records and all everything, but all those other domains also need to have an SPF record. And here again, nefarious actors can target your organization. They can find out which domains you own, find a really good one, probably a brand protection domain name that's not covered, and start sending emails from that domain name or to your customers internally as a spearfish and internally to your business. This is a serious issue that, frankly, it's easy to solve if you can just allocate those resources or put in some systems to be able to control it. So what you need to do here is figure out how to modernize. You're going to get burned if you don't. So a lot of companies are using some fairly old technology. I was in that category myself. We were actually a registrar, but we worked for a large Fortune 1000 business. So modernization is how leading enterprises are now establishing security compliance programs over these digital assets. So sort of as a summary here, what do you do about this? So I sort of think of this as a two-step process. That's all a precursor to saying you need to have a leadership sponsor to say, okay, yes, we need to get this under control. And then somewhere internally, you need that IT ownership. And the two-step is really to start off with, you need to know where your vulnerabilities are. So, what is your vulnerability risk? It's really about visibility. We see this everywhere today about people trying to understand their networks. If you don't have visibility, there's just no way that you can manage that. And then secondly, you need a single pane of glass control system to manage this, to enforce your policies, make sure they're in compliance, and frankly, just make it easy for your teams. So as a summary on this, there's really, I think I've got 4 things here that I want to point out. So one, it's a real pain for IT directors. So if you're here and you're a director, you know this very well. Everything's manual. You're looking at your domains and your DNS, and they're all over the place. Secondly, we've established the vulnerability risk, and the incident evidence just continues to grow. And the meme out there, and it's always been there, is that it's always the DNS. So as you dig in, trying to figure out what's going on when you have an incident, someone comes back and they say, well, it looks like the DNS, somebody changed the DNS, and that's why that service is down today. And this sort of comes from another sort of common practice that started up in the late 90s and early 2000s, which shows how long I've been in this business. It was a set it and forget it attitude. Set the DNS, forget it, don't worry about it. There's sort of 2 things there, right? So the first one is it's working, don't touch it. And the second one is nobody ever touches it, even though you need to clean stuff up after whatever particular service you're presenting is turned down. And we know that IT lacks time and they lack the tools. So it needs to be automated. You need to get that visibility and you need to get that control. And essentially there, what you're saying to everybody is, we need to empower teams with systems to help get and keep control of that, to ensure that you've got best practices in security, you've got change managed compliance in place, and if you manage your DNS well, your digital systems will operate more effectively for those customers and audiences that you're trying to reach. And also internally, you'll improve the performance of your own people. They'll be able to act and be more efficient in their business. So you need that control, visibility, and automation over it. I hope that's really helpful. Obviously, this is something that we do. We're really passionate about it over here. We've used built a lot of tools to make it easy for people to do this, and our customers love it. It just makes it easy for the IT guys that was a real pain is now just simply become simple, and away they go, and they've got the tools to be able to see that. So I hope that was great. I hope you learned something. We'll be posting this video of this webinar online. And if you have any questions, if you wanted to dig in, if you wanted to understand something that might have been said today, don't hesitate to reach out and shoot me a note. And with that, I'll wish you adieu and wish you a very, very good day. Thanks very much.